In the past, there were fools who defied the supreme beings and invaded Nazarick, breaching the defenses of the 7th floor. However, they did not reach the 9th floor, where the supreme beings resided. That being the case, they must have been stopped at the 8th floor, right? Though I do not have any recollection of the event, the opposition must have brought fearsome fighting power with them to make it that far in, so I believe they were halted with equally extraordinary might. However, I have no idea who intercepted the intruders. No, Albedo should know. After all, she is the guardian overseer of Nazarick. It would be strange if she did not know that. As though ignoring the silent Sabas, Shaltir continued asking, "It's kind of annoying to hear she's one step ahead of me. What sort of mysterious beings are found on the 8th floor? Characters personally crafted by Ain Sama, perhaps? Sabas was made by Touch Me. Demiurge was made by Ulbert Alan Odal. Cositus was made by warrior Takamikazuchi." However, even Shaltir did not know what sort of NPC that Ains, or Momonga, the highest ranked of the 41 supreme beings, had created. Surely he had created somebody, right? That being the case, it was reasonable to conclude that this mysterious character resided on the 8th floor, about which Shaltir had no knowledge. No, that should not be the case. This is just a rumor, but I heard that the NPC Ains created is called Pandora's Actor, and his strength is comparable to the rest of us Guardians. Apparently, he defends the depths of the treasury. Does someone like that really exist? Unlike Albedo, Shaltir had not been infused with knowledge about everyone in Nazarick. Therefore, this name was new to her. Granted, the treasury was a place which one could only enter with the ring of Ains Ulgaun, but it would be strange to leave it unguarded. The depths of the treasury. All of the highest-end magic items that Ains Ulgaun had collected were stored in there. It was also said that it contained several world-class items. That being the case, it was the most suitable location for the NPC created by the greatest of the 41 supreme beings, Ains, to defend. Shaltir's pride was somewhat bruised as she considered that she had not been chosen to guard such exalted ground, but she consoled herself with the thought that it was unavoidable. To Shaltir, keeping intruders from straying beyond the 3rd floor was also a crucial task, every bit as important as protecting the treasury. And now, her master had given her another vital task. Indeed, but I have not seen that person before. After all, one cannot travel to that place without a ring. Oh, Shaltir's answer was devoid of energy, as though she had lost all interest in the whole thing. However, Sabas did not seem to mind. Still, the 8th floor is a mysterious place, it's kind of a shame. Indeed. After all, it is a place that even we cannot enter. There must be something inside. And what exactly is that something? Could it be there's a trap in there which might even attack us? That's not a bad idea, though if I had to guess, could it be a death trap that indiscriminately kills anyone who enters it? The great tomb of Nazarick was handcrafted by the supreme beings, and defended by us, who have pledged our lives in service. Anyone who could penetrate an impregnable fortress like that and breach the 7th floor would probably not be stopped by a trap like that. Do you want to take a look? Shaltir had a smile on her face, like a child up to some mischief. Sabas's smile was the same as always, but there was a certain nuance to it now. Do you intend to defy Ains Sama's wishes? Just kidding, just kidding. It was just a joke, no need to look so scary. Shaltir, curiosity killed the cat. We should wait quietly until Ains Sama tells us otherwise. You've got a point there, then, has our prey taken the bait? Sabas did not ask about the sudden change in topic. Instead he directly replied, yes, they've fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. All we need to do is reel them in. Shaltir nodded slightly, and then she lightly licked her lips. Her crimson pupils blazed. Sabas immediately realized what would put Shaltir in a mood like that. Sensing that this was the perfect time to do so, he decided to bring up Solution's request from earlier. I have a request to make concerning this matter, Shaltir. What is it? The reply was one of annoyance, given that Sabas had jolted Shaltir out of her delight over what was soon to unfold. As though to comfort her, Sabas continued, could you give the driver of our coach to this girl? Is he an underling? Indeed. He seems to be a messenger of sorts. Shaltir closed her eyes and pondered the request. After considering several possibilities, she seemed to have come to a conclusion, and she nodded. That should be fine. Besides, he doesn't look like he'd taste good if I fed on him. You have my sincerest thanks for your generosity, Shaltir. Thank you, Shaltir-sama. Ah, you're welcome, think nothing of it. Shaltir was quite surprised by how tenderly Solution smiled to her. She had not expected such a sincere expression. Then, Shaltir composed herself and turned to Sabas. Then, we're even for that little mistake of mine just now. I understand. In truth, I didn't expect you to do anything quite as foolish as that. It was merely a jest, was it not? Indeed, you're right. If you had said such a thing, Sabas, I would have taken it as a joke as well. Then I would have my subordinates watch you in silence. At the first sight of any treachery on your part, I would remove your limbs and have your torso dragged in chains before Ain-sama. I'm hardly as ruthless as you are, Shaltir. No? Things like that only make me doubt your loyalty more. You would do that too, wouldn't you? Sabas and Shaltir locked eyes, and smiled from the bottoms of their hearts. Besides, I like cute girls the best. There might be a different sort of entertainment in giving him to Solution. Then, how do you intend to capture them? Through paralysis, or hold person? Before they had set out for Irantal, Ains had given Sabas an order: I want to capture humans who know martial arts or magic. However, you will only go after criminals whose absence will go unnoticed. Therefore, Solution and Sabas had played the role of a stuck-up, stubborn heiress and her easily bamboozled butler, with the intention of hooking a fish like Zack. Shaltir's mission, on the other hand, was to use a fish like that to net the entire school which followed him. Why would I go to such great lengths? Ain-sama did say that it was all right to drain them dry and turn them into slaves. The important things was that I absolutely had to capture them. Still, investigating them all one by one would be a hassle, so I might as well just suck them all dry. Sabas did not speak the words in his heart, I see, but instead nodded. Still, he had to acknowledge that he was not entirely comfortable with Shaltir's interpretation of her orders. With that in mind, Sabas could not help but say, from that point of view, Demiurge-sama would be the most suitable for that sort of work. After all, he can control his opponent's thoughts, much like Ora-sama can with her breath. Demiurge possessed a skill known as command mantra. It was a powerful mind-affecting ability, which would be invaluable during a capture operation like this. Ha! Shaltir exclaimed in an unbelievably low tone. The mood within the coach turned grim immediately, as though a fog of bone-chilling cold hung in the air. Even the horses pulling the coach seemed to have sensed this, because the vehicle suddenly lurched. The bloodless faces of the vampire brides flanking Shaltir turned even paler than usual, while Solution shuddered in her place beside Sabas. Even Sabas, whose might should have been on par with Shaltir's, could feel goosebumps breaking out on him. This was the murderous intent emitted by the strongest of Nazarik's floor guardians. The hostility which wreathed her made her previous spats with Aura seem like child's play. If the situation was mishandled, it might lead to a life-or-death melee. As Shaltir chilled the air ever further, the color of her crimson pupils began to spill out into her sclera, dyeing her eyes red as though they were filling with blood. Sabas, could you say that again? Or are you saying that a dragonoid like yourself in that form, wants to, her eyeballs, now completely red, twitched, wants to start a fight with me? I misspoke, please forgive me. I was merely a little uneasy. It would be fine as long as your blood frenzy doesn't kick in. Shaltir's response was silence. Sabas could tell that the brief silence was a sign of her unease toward herself. In Yggdrasil, strong classes were typically balanced out with weaknesses and penalties. One of the penalties Shaltir suffered from was called blood frenzy. The more fresh blood that covered her body, the greater her urge to slaughter. While this made her stronger, in return she would no longer be able to control her actions. The reason why Ains had made use of Shaltir for this mission, who might have ended up ignoring orders or even going berserk, was due to a process of elimination. Albedo had to remain in the Great Tomb of Nazarick in Ains' absence, and among the two remaining guardians, Shaltir and Cositus, Shaltir looked more like a human being from a distance. After that, Shaltir took several deep breaths. She seemed to be trying to suck her anger back up, or perhaps she was trying to quell the uneasiness in her heart. With her last breath, Shaltir resumed her normal expression, an attractive young girl with a seductive air about her, and her pupils returned to their original color. For the most part, they'll become my slaves after I drain their blood, which should make things simple. Besides, we don't need to bring them back alive. Ainsama brought it up before as well. Also, I will definitely keep my blood frenzy under control. Vampires were a species which could drain a victim's blood and turn them into perfectly loyal minions. Most vampires could only create unintelligent lesser vampires in this way, but the vampires which Shaltir could make had nearly as much intelligence as a normal human. As long as one did not care if the prey was alive or dead, Shaltir qualified as quite a good hunter, although the number of vampires she could create was limited. That's right, so there's no need to say more. I will accomplish the mission Ainsama gave me without fail, so he will praise me with "Well done, Shaltir. You are my most important slave," and then say, "You are the one most worthy of standing by my side." Please forgive my shallow comments. Sabaz's apology was sincere and came from the heart. It was not just directed to Shaltir, but to someone else. I did not realize that my statements were a slight on Ainsama, who chose you for this task, and I apologize for that as well. I hope you will forgive me for displeasing you. Then, he bowed to Solution, and the vampire brides in apology. Just then, the coach shuddered, and they heard neighing from the horses which drew the vehicle. It seems we have stopped. Indeed. Shaltir, lost as she was in fantasies of the praise her master would lavish on her once she succeeded in her task, returned to her senses. She smiled, like a girl who had just thought up a wonderful prank to play. Sabaz too was stroking his mustache as he smiled. Part 4. About 10 strong men had emerged from the forest, forming a semicircle around the coach. None of these men were equipped in exactly the same way. Still, while they were not masterworks, their equipment was not of poor make. It was clear that they had handpicked their weapons. The casual way in which they were discussing how to deal with their target, and the order in which they would go sounded like they already had their prey in the bag. Indeed, they had done this sort of thing countless times in the past. It would be strange if they had felt worried. After Zack leapt off the driver's seat, he jogged over to the men who had appeared. While dismounting from the driver's seat, he had cut the reins so the coach would not be able to drive off, and after monkeying with the coach doors, they would only open on the side facing the men. The men brandished their weapons so their prey could see. This was a wordless warning. If they did not come out quickly, they would be in trouble. In response, the coach doors slowly opened. A beautiful woman revealed herself under the moonlight. The gathered sellswords and bandits laughed coarsely, and looked on her with lustful eyes. It was clear from their expressions that they were delighted. However, one person among them was taken aback. That person was Zack. His surprise could be summarized in 3 words: "Who is this?" Zack had never seen this beauty before. However, the coach was very familiar to him, and the contrast between the two plunged Zack into confusion, and left him speechless. After that, another beautiful woman appeared, dressed much like the first. Doubt began blooming on the men's faces. Their targets should have been an heiress who did not know how the world worked, as well as an old butler. And then, a girl who might have been considered little showed up, and their doubts vanished. Her silvery hair gleamed in the moonlight, and her dewy, crimson eyes held a seductive radiance. The bandits could only gasp at the sight of these beauties, unable to so much as muster up the words for praise. In this moment, even their bestial lust shrank away in the face of true beauty. Shaltir smiled lewdly as she bathed in the enthralled gazes of the men. She advanced unguardedly before them and said, "Gentlemen, thank you for coming all this way here for me. May I know who is your leader? May I negotiate with him? After seeing the bandits look toward the same person, Shaltir learned what she needed to know. That was to say, everyone else here was expendable. What do you want to talk about? The man who looked like their leader seemed to have come to his senses after his close encounter with these beautiful women. He strode forward. Please forgive the misunderstanding. What I meant by negotiations was just a joke for me to learn what I needed to know. Sorry about that. Who are you people? Shaltir looked to Zack, who had asked that question. You must be that Zack fellow. I will give you the solution as promised, so could you please step aside for a while? Some of the bandits sought an answer for their confusion in each other's faces. However, among them, you've got a good body for a brat. I'll make you cry for me in a bit. The bandit who happened to be standing in front of Shaltir reached out to grope that ample bust of hers, which did not match her age. And then, the appendage tumbled to the ground. Could you not touch me with your filthy hand? The dumbfounded man looked at his now handless arm, and after a moment's delay, he wailed, "Ah! My how I want! You're making so much noise over losing a single hand. Are you even a man?" Shaltir casually flicked her hand as she muttered quietly, and the man's head fell to the earth as well. How had she chopped his head off with her unarmed, dainty, and slender hands? The nightmare before them hardly seemed real. The bandits were terrified beyond all capacity for rational thought, unable to react in the wake of this tremendous shock. However, what they saw next snapped them back to their senses. The fresh blood spurting from the severed portions of the body moved as though it had a will of its own, gathering above Shaltir's head and forming an orb of blood. Shaltir and company knew this was the effect of the skill called blood pool. However, the first thing these clueless bandits thought as they saw this inhuman ability was, she's a magic caster. Anyone who understood magic should have been able to give a more accurate warning. Magic caster was a very broad term which referred to many professions and jobs, and the means of dealing with them were just as varied. In particular, one might think of Shaltir, who only wore a dress, as an arcane magic caster, or perhaps a spiritual magic caster. However, none of them spoke a warning like that. One could thus conclude that none of them knew anything about magic. In other words, they thought of anything they could not understand as magic. As Shaltir realized this, she looked disinterestedly at these panicking bandits, who desperately raised their swords against her. How boring. Clean this mess up. Also, leave this one and that one, understood? Yes, Shaltir-sama. The vampire brides waiting behind Shaltir on either side stepped forward, and one of them punched the face of a bandit trying to attack Shaltir, sending him flying. It looked as though someone had swung a metal pole into his face with all their strength. The bandits arced through the air, accompanied by the sound of something like a filled balloon popping. All manner of bodily fluids, blood, brain matter, and more, burst forth from his skull. The gore gleamed under the moonlight, looking all the more beautiful for its horrific appearance. More than half of the bandit's head went flying, and pinkish brains sprayed from the shattered cranium. Pulled by gravity, the bandit's corpse rolled to the ground with a great thud. That sound was a starting bell which filled the bandits with terror, and Shaltir with delight. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. Zack smiled stiffly as he watched the scene in front of him. It was a truly horrific sight. He wanted to vomit as he smelled the blood which came from the carnage before him. Men had their hands and feet torn off like scraps of paper, and skulls popped between paired hands like ripe pomegranates. A breastplate was ripped off and a hand stabbed into the now exposed belly. When it came back out, it took several meters of gleaming, slippery intestine with it. The fact that the victim was still alive after that spoke of the resilience of mankind. A man was squirming on the ground, trying to flee even with both legs broken. White-colored objects, his broken bones, protruded through his skin and flesh. He was desperately trying to crawl away with his hands, struggling to get himself away from the source of this horror, wanting to stay alive for just one moment longer.